Hello and welcome to episode 208 of Page One, the Writers' Podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and as you can hear from my voice, I'm feeling slightly under the weather this week, but I will push through. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. If this is your first episode, one, I don't normally sound like this, but two, there's a whole back catalogue.
Normally sounds much worse.
Yes, exactly. There's a whole back catalogue of great guests on there. Just this run of episodes, we've had people like Lee Child, Kate Moss. So please do go and check those out. And this week, the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of fantasy authors on the pod. And I guess we're kind of staying within that realm because this is a sort of cross-genre, some elements of fantasy, some time slip things going on.
Yes, we're chatting with Adam Howorth this week, whose debut novel, Fallen Feathers, is, as Marco says, a kind of time slip, sci-fi, fantasy genre mashup. And I mean, it's had some pretty impressive, what's the word? Endorsements from the likes of Stephen Fry.
Yes.
Who called it Enthralling. And it's an interesting chat, which Marco has. I'm actually not on this week.
Yeah. Tarek's not on this episode. I did this interview myself, but no, it is. But Adam's got an interesting background because he was I think until very, very recently, he was the lead communications person for Apple, certainly in the UK. And he talks about how he tried to bring his experience in that and working in the music industry and stuff into the way that he brought this book out, because it's not traditionally published. He's tried to indie publish it in his own way, and he talks about that, working with a PR company, working with book designers, etc., etc. So it's an interesting episode from that point of view. He's also someone that has come to write a book, relatively late on, and in the sense that he didn't even, I tried to, as you'll hear in the podcast, I asked him about whether he was a planner or pantser, and there was an awkward pause because he had no idea what a pantser was. I'm so used to people knowing this writing parlance that I throw these terms about, and he thought I was mad. But yeah, no, we chat about his process, which is interesting, and as he says, for that first book, it's a process that he never ever wants to repeat again, because it was very much a sort of trial and error approach that he took for that first one.
Yeah, no, it's a really great chat, and he is a little bit different. He has a little bit different entry into the market, and
it's
a lot of people like.
It's always interesting to hear how people approach non-trad publishing and what they do and how they get it to work for them. I did want to mention a couple of things. One, I don't know if Adam had his window open when we recorded this, but as I was editing this episode, I did notice there is quite a lot of, you can hear bird song, you can hear children playing, you can hear airplanes flying overhead. I've done my best to focus on Adam's answers, but you will hear that in the background. But also, I just wanted to give a quick mention to the fact that we do have our Patreon. If you didn't know that, I'll put a link in the podcast description. You get all sorts of perks. You get pin badges, you get notebooks, you get books, you get bookmarks, but you also get bonus content, including our new drafting notes series of podcasts, where Tarek and I take one aspect of writing and have a quick sort of 15-20 minute discussion about that. And we've got the first 3 episodes of those up on our YouTube for anyone to watch, but they are the new episodes will be going on the Patreon, so please do check that out if you haven't already. But otherwise, we'll get straight into the episode after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
So I always like to start the podcast with the same question, which is, did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, pretty much so. Ever since I was at school, it was probably the one academic discipline that I had any kind of aptitude for. And when I started studying English as a teenager, I had a brilliant teacher then who sort of instilled in me a great deal of confidence in my ability to read and write about literature. And so at that point, I always felt that if ever I was going to do anything vocationally, it would be to do with writing. And in a way I have, but it's taken me quite a while to write creatively.
Yeah, because I think I'm right in saying that you, I don't know if you still do, but you did work at Apple as a communications director. When you were doing that, when you were doing your other careers, have you always been writing in the background, or is it something you've come back to more recently?
No, I think, before Apple, I worked as an entertainment journalist, so I was writing professionally then. Before that, I was writing songs. Creative writing is something that's more recent. I was always looking for a story to tell, and I just couldn't find it. I think a lot of PRs would say that part of their job is creative writing, and it's narratives and it's telling stories to journalists. So I think there was always an element of that anyway. But I always prided myself on my writing and writing to the best of my ability and encouraging those that work with me to write well. But it's only relatively recently, in the last few years, that I've been writing creatively.
And so what was it that spurred you on to actually give this a go and try and write a novel then?
Yeah, it was, I'd been reading a lot more and really enjoying it. And for a long time, after I worked as an entertainment journalist, primarily a music journalist, I used to really enjoy it, but it wasn't quite enough. Playing in bands and writing songs, I used to absolutely love that. And I thought, I don't actually enjoy being on stage playing, but I do like writing songs. But the songwriting process to me was never particularly enjoyable. I found it very uncomfortable writing songs, and I don't know why. And when I finished it, I really enjoyed it. And it was fabulous hearing, particularly other people who could sing better than me performing songs. But I didn't enjoy the process that much. So I knew that I wanted to be creative, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then when I got the idea for Fallen Feathers and started it, I realized finally that this is what I absolutely love doing and love to spend all my time doing.
And yeah, so we'll get on to Fallen Feathers, which is the book that you have coming out shortly. But I suppose to start with, I want to explore. You said that you worked, or you did music, you wrote songs, albeit not your favorite thing to do, perhaps. But what was your process when you sat down to write this story? Did you sit down and plan it all out, or are you more a pantser, as they say?
A pantser?
Yeah, it's writing by the seat of your pants. It's a big phrase in the writing world. I've discovered on this podcast.
Oh no, I love learning about it because it's, the whole industry is new to me and I find it absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I'm a pantser, or I definitely was with the first book, and I will never do it again. It was hugely indulgent how I wrote this book, and I would write as inspiration struck, and I'd think of certain scenes and characters and then their backstories, and then there'd be another patchwork of scenes and characters that I'd start working on. And I was always deferring the day when I would actually have to make sense of it all and put it into a coherent narrative. And it was so painful, Marco. And in the end, I had to send it all off to the printers and get this huge parcel come back and spread it across my living room floor and just go through it with coloured markers and scissors and chopping it up. And it was probably the most painful thing I've ever done. So I won't do it again.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you not, I suppose in that process, when you were actually writing it, presumably you thought, this is fine, I'll deal with this later kind of thing. And then when the moment came, it was, yeah.
It was just denial when I was writing it, because I'm sure that most people when they're writing would agree that the fun bit is when you're creating these scenes and you've got dialogues between characters, and then you suddenly think of something else that would work really well or would make sense based on something else that had happened. And I enjoyed that so much, and I didn't have much time for writing, so I'd carve out time whenever I could, and I didn't want to spend it editing, going over the boring stuff and making sure everything makes sense. And unfortunately, it's like anything else, you will pay for it eventually, and I did. And but I've learnt my lesson, and I'm not going to be, what's it, a pantser.
Pantser.
I'm not going to be a pantser again.
but in that process, so this is the first sort of long form fiction that you've written, and okay, you've learned some lessons there, it's fair to say. But in that process of writing it, did you did you have the story? I know you said you pantsed it and you wrote the scenes as they came to you, but did you have a sort of goal where you were aiming to? Were there certain flagpoles that you wanted to hit in the story?
A really good question. Not especially. I had a general idea of where it was going, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to play out. I was almost writing the scenes as they were happening. So I had a rough idea of where I wanted it to go, but I wasn't 100% certain until kind of near the end, really.
And when you were doing that writing, were you writing every day? Did you have a routine, or was it just whenever you could?
No, I sort of got stuck into it early on when my daughter was quite small, and I spent time taking her out for walks and things like that. And then as she became more demanding of my time, I found I didn't have as much time to write at weekends, and the day job was getting in the way a little bit. And so I'd try and steal time when I was commuting and, write on my phone on the way to work. And in my lunch hour, go off and write a little bit like that. And then when the pandemic came along, I decided that I was going to use the time that otherwise I'd have spent commuting to work to devote to finishing my book.
And so eventually you have written it all, you've printed it out, you've got the paper scattered everywhere, and you start presumably at that stage to finalize it into a version of it that you're happy with. When you had that version, what did you do then next? Did you show it to people? Did you send it out to people? What was the next step?
Do you know, it was before then really, Marco, because I was I kept alternating between thinking this is really good and this is absolutely dreadful, and you mustn't spend any more time on this project. And it could change from day to day, hour to hour. I could write something I thought was really good, and I'd go away and think about it, and I think that's just awful. And then I'd lose confidence in it. So I can't remember where I was. I'd probably written about a third of it maybe a little bit more when I just showed a little bit of it to, a couple of friends to get their take on it. And it's always very difficult when you show it to friends because they're friends. They're not going to say, this is absolute tripe.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It depends on your friend again.
Well, yeah, some of them would. I didn't show it to those ones, Marco. But I showed it to a couple of nice ones, and they were very encouraging and said, listen, you've got to crack on. You've got to finish it. And so that helped me do it. And then once I got to that stage, I went back to them again and again. They were very positive and encouraging. And once I sort of knocked it into shape, I sent it off to a couple of agents.
And yeah, so I was going to ask that because we'll get onto this, but part of the way that Fallen Feathers is coming to market, is coming out, is, I've read about you saying that you're sort of wanting to disrupt the usual model and things like that. But it sounds like initially, at least, you took a relatively traditional path, I guess, sending it out to agents, see if anything happened there. So what happened at that stage?
Yeah, definitely did. As I say, that I'm new to this industry. I didn't know what a pantser was, and there's lots more I don't know. And so I'd read that that's the process you go through and everything. And then I decided from what I learned from the music industry that the most powerful ally you can have is probably the first one who really believes in you. So I decided that the first person who came back to me and said they liked this and wanted to work with me, on principle, I'd want to work with them. And that was Jenny Todd at the Literary Office. She just set up her agency. So I knew then and there that I wanted to work with Jenny.
Okay.
And then, she started sending it off to a few publishers, and we got really lovely feedback, and people weren't quite sure of the format or which genre or, who it was targeted at. And then we started talking about, could we do this ourselves? So we had a fantastic PR firm on board. We put together our own little independent team. Could we just put this out under our own terms, find the art director we wanted with a cover we thought was excellent, and do it our way, which is what we've decided to do.
Yeah, so I mean that's quite a big. I mean, obviously in the past decade or so, routes have opened up for authors to do this self-publishing or independent indie publishing, whatever you want to call it. It's got different terminology in the industry, but at what stage, how long before you made that decision, were you quite happy to do that, or were you wanting to go the traditional route?
Initially, I probably wanted to go the traditional route because it hadn't occurred to me to do it any other way. But then, because I've worked in the music industry and I've seen how that has changed over time and how easy it is for bands to put their own records out, do their own marketing and develop a fan base and be truly independent and enjoy that creative freedom, I said to Jenny, why don't we do this ourselves? But it was contingent on having a brilliant agent and a fantastic PR team behind us. I think it'd be quite daunting to try and do it all yourself. I think you need strong allies, which I'm lucky enough to have.
Yeah, and just in relation to that then, so you've chosen to go this different way. You say you don't know the industry. So do you think that sort of helped you in a way, that naivety almost?
Yeah.
Go down this path?
Oh, I'm sure it does. But I think it's good to look at things with a fresh eye, and Jenny was really supportive of it as well. And I'm sure it does. I'm sure the fact that I haven't come from the industry, I don't have a great background in it. I really don't know very many people within the publishing industry at all. I'm slowly learning. I'm sure that helped.
So I mean, obviously, what happens in a traditional publishing deal is you get your agent sends it out, publisher says, editor says, I'm interested, picks it up, and then from that point on, really, the publisher picks up the heavy lifting, if you like. They will get you an editor, a structural editor if needed be, a copy editor. They will get covers designed. They will get their publicity department involved, hopefully, and marketing department. And, obviously there are different levels of this depending on how much they're pushing the book. But, they take on that load. And I suppose that's the payoff or the balance. If you are giving them, you're not getting as much out of the book when it sells, obviously, at that stage. But on your own, you are, or doing it the way you've done it, you're taking on a lot more of the burden, albeit you have obviously worked with different people to do it. But, you know, you're having to sort of coordinate these different things. So how did you find that? Was that okay? And were there any obstacles or sticking points that came up along the way?
Not really, but I would say that's very much something that Jenny organised and coordinated for me, because she has the background in the industry. She obviously spent a long time at Canongate, and again, I don't think, well, I know we wouldn't have got to where we are without her. She's worked very closely with Troubadour, who have done an excellent job, and the editor that they put on the book was fantastic, and I thought the proofreader was really good. And then Jenny found the designer, Paul, who I think has done a superb job on the cover. And again, Jenny went out and got Fiona from the PR team to come on board with it. So, Jenny's kind of fulfilled the role of a publisher to a degree.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like, yeah, it almost sounds like you've taken a path that is sort of in between traditional publishing and the fully self-publishing model. So, and Jenny's sort of been your guiding light through that. I mean, we should obviously, we've talked around it, but the book is Fallen Feathers. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I was chatting to somebody earlier about this. It's quite difficult to talk about it without giving away too much of what the book's about. But it is about faith and family and, the magic of children and belief and religion. And I think it's a mystery, it's a thriller, it's slightly supernatural.
Yeah,
it's all of those things.
It's when these books actually, when you talk about it, and I did read the description on the website and stuff. It's very much what they would call in the industry a cross genre book. So it is difficult, I guess, to place it in a neat little box, which often is what puts publishers off these types of books, because we've spoken to many people on the podcast, and they will, publishers, if you write a crime book with a supernatural element, then they want to know, are you putting this on the crime shelves, or are you putting this on the horror shelves, and things like that. So I guess that in itself is maybe, why books like this can do better when you take a non-conventional route to being published. I did read that, I think I'm right in saying that the idea came to you when you were walking with your daughter and you sort of thought about seeing the world through her eyes. Is that right? Is that where the spark of the idea began?
Yeah, kind of. It was, I was out walking one evening, actually, and I saw a very full moon through the trees over the river, and it was magical and captivating. And my daughter had started observing the moon whenever it was, even during daylight. Sometimes you can see that faint outline, and it's one of her first words. She'd just point up and say moon, and I found that really interesting, that she seems to be drawn to it from an early age. So then I imagined the story of a girl who was drawn to the moon, and she sees this beautiful moon one evening over the river from her bedroom window. And once I had the start to it, I was able to start progressing the story. But a lot of it is seen through her eyes, definitely not her eyes, but a young girl's eyes.
Mm-hmm. And were there any difficulties that you had in? I know we discussed earlier about the actual process of writing it, and then the having the draft and then trying to piece it all together. But I mean, were there any difficulties that you encountered in terms of sticking points in the story at all when you were writing it, that you'd written yourself into a corner or didn't know what was going to happen with a specific character or anything like that?
That's a really good question. I think I'll try to shut them out, actually, Marco. But I think that, the slightly supernatural element to it wasn't intentional to begin with, and it just started moving that way. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable about it at the time, because I couldn't quite work out where that had come from. So that took some working out as to how it would resolve itself and how it would tie into an otherwise modern story, because there's two timelines in there as well, from a few hundred years ago to the modern day, and trying to pull them together and make sense of them both almost happening simultaneously. That I think that took a lot of effort, a lot of thought.
And when you do have timelines like that, did you write the book in a linear way? Which sounds like an odd question, but we have spoken to people on the podcast before who, especially if there's different timelines, will sometimes focus on one and then focus on the other to try and have a through line in that particular part of the book.
No, I didn't. I kept jumping between the two. As I say, that it was so ill thought out, but it was such fun doing it.
Yeah.
And so, the story of Edward, who is a monk, and his story takes place hundreds of years ago, and I would love inhabiting his world with him. But then when I tired of it and I wanted something different, I would start moving into Elizabeth's more modern world. So I didn't sort of follow on through and then do the other one at all. I would jump between the two. I have quite a short attention span, as you're probably gathering.
And it's fair to say that the book isn't out yet, but the build up to it, the blurbs that you have on the front cover are the sort of blurbs that a debut author could only dream of. You've got blurbs there from Stephen Fry, from Georgie Grigg, from people that established authors would struggle to get a quote from. So I mean, how did that come about?
Well, I'm lucky enough to know the three people, Rosie Nixon as well, who is the editor-in-chief at Hello and is a brilliant author herself. So I don't mean I'm a brilliant author. I mean, she is also a brilliant author as well as being for me. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So I knew them anyway, but it's really hard to then go to people and say, will you read my book? And if you like it, will you, give me a nice blurb to go on the front for it? Rosie helped me very early on. She was very encouraging, and she was one of, I think, probably my first reader, and was really helpful to me, and was a great supporter and gave me the confidence to finish it, actually. And then Stephen, he was wonderful, and we've known each other a long time. But it's very difficult to go to somebody who is a formidable writer as well as everything else that he's great at, and ask him to read it. I think Geordie was probably the toughest, because Geordie used to be the literary editor of the Sunday Times, I think, and he's held many senior editorial roles. Most currently, he's at the helm of The Independent. But I went down to have lunch with him, and we were chatting away about various different things, and then thought, you've got to tell him. And then I sort of said it quite quietly, and he says, what's that? You've written a book? And I said, yes. And before I could even say anything about it, he says, Adam, everyone thinks they've got a book in them and they haven't. And most people can't write, and it's absolutely terrible. I'm thinking, oh, this is awful. And then he said, do you want me to read it? I'm thinking, oh, God, no. But I sent it to him, and then he came back and said something like, you actually can write. This is really good. And which was wonderful, but very daunting. And it's the same as Stephen. So I'm extremely lucky. But I would say that they wouldn't say that they liked it if they didn't, because it would just undermine everything they're about. But I'm extremely fortunate to be able to ask them in the first place.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether it was, because it is a great thing on the one hand, especially as a debut author, to get people of that caliber to be able to say that they enjoyed your book. But at the same time, certainly the fear that I would have in giving
awful
to someone like that, in case
it was awful, Marco. It was awful, because in the same way that Rosie had encouraged me so much, if either of those two had come back and said, don't give up the day job, honestly, it would have killed me there and then, because I respect them so much. And Geordie has proven himself as a great literary critic, and Stephen is a fantastic writer. So you have to listen to what they've got to say, and they're friends, and they wouldn't have sugarcoated it. So I was really scared waiting for feedback on those, I have to say.
Absolutely. I mean, and the book is now close to coming out, and are you excited for that? Have you got plans for that? Is there a launch? Is there what are the plans there?
Yeah, I am really excited, but I'm really scared as well, Marco, because in the same way, you're sending it out into the hands of people to hopefully read it for the first time, and there is that fear. And I think it is because, as you say, it sort of does cross genres a little bit. It's not as straightforward as perhaps some people might be used to reading. So I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know what the reviews will be like, the feedback will be like. I mean, I hope I get some reviews. It has to be better than, not getting reviews, but then you hope that you're going to get some kind words as well. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest, but I am excited, and I'm hugely grateful to everybody that's put so much time and effort into a project for absolutely nothing. The effort Jen has put into it has been ridiculous, and I tease her about the fact that she has spent so long working on something which only costs her money and doesn't earn her any.
Well, I was going to. I mean, if we can talk about that, and if you're not comfortable, then that's fine. But I was going to say, in this model, again, if we go back to the traditional publishing model, what would normally happen is that you would get an advance of a certain amount, and then obviously royalties if you earn out that advance. Is that how it's worked with this model, or is it not like that for this model?
No, we've effectively put together the little operation ourselves, so we're funding everything ourselves.
Yeah.
So if it makes any money, then once all the costs are paid, then I guess we'll get that money. But I haven't really thought about the financial side of it that much. It's more about, we just wanted this book to see the light of day, and we wanted people to read it, and if it recoups, then excellent. But if not, then
yeah. But if not, you've still got a published book at the end of the day. So that's that's a huge.
It's definitely it's a labour of love, Marco. It's a labour of love, and I absolutely love writing, and Jenny is a huge supporter of what I've done. So I'm hopeful for her sake more than mine that we're successful with it.
And in terms of having put in this work into this labour of love, as you put it, the book's coming out now. I don't know what the numbers are in terms of books coming out, but there's so many books come out these days.
Oh yeah.
I think on Thursday just past, you had books from Kate Moss, Ian Rankin. They all launch on the same day, and it's a huge. It's easy even for books that have some publishing push behind them to get lost. Have you got plans in terms of marketing or publicity or anything like that to try and get people to notice this book? Because obviously you've got the great quotes. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The PR team are working really hard on reviews and interviews, I think. So it's going to be PR driven more than anything. And then hopefully word of mouth, get it into as many people's hands as we possibly can, and get people talking about it. And we're just looking at various marketing activations and social activations we can do around that. But the key thing for me is that I wouldn't want to go into sort of marketing hype overdrive, because something's got to be good. And I think if it's good, the word will get out and people will buy it and read it and enjoy it. And you don't want to market something heavily which people actually don't like and it's rubbish and they never want to hear from you again. So I think, if you've got a book that's good, people will come onto it eventually.
And this is maybe, I know this one isn't even out yet, but I'm looking further down the line. I mean, I'm guessing that you would like to write another one after this, and if so, is this the model you would still like to use? Would you like to have another go at getting in one of the, big 5 publishers or something like that? What are your thoughts there, or is it too early to say?
Yeah, it's too early really, Mark. I think it depends how this goes. I think if the most important thing for me when I wrote it is I wanted people to, read it and respond to it. And the very few who have read it and have been positive about it, it's so rewarding. And I'm sure most authors would say the same. It's not so much the number, it's just that somebody's actually connected with something you've written. So that's the most important thing for me with it. And the more people that do, the better, the nicer it is, the more rewarding creatively. So I guess it just depends how it goes. If it does get noticed and people respond to it, and we're happy with the results of our labour, putting it together and putting it out, then we will do it again like that. But if an option comes in to do it differently, we'd look at that as well. We're not sort of wedded to either way of doing it. I think it's just because this book is so different, we wanted to kind of do it our way so it didn't get too diluted by working with a mainstream publisher on it.
And doing, I know you said it's early to say now, but I mean, for the next book, do you have ideas for the next book already? Is it going to be another cross-genre type story, or are you focusing more on a specific genre?
No, I think yeah, I am working on a new book. I don't think it's cross-genre. It's a little clearer to me, but it wasn't a conscious decision to try and write something that's more conforming. It was just the way this one came along and the ideas for it came along. So I'm probably about a third of the way through. I did promise Jenny I'd have it finished by the time the first one came out, but life's got in the way of that. But don't tell her. Hopefully she won't be listening to this. Fine.
And interestingly, going back, I suppose, to what we were discussing earlier, how have you written this one? Did you plan this one out a bit more rather than
yes?
Where it went?
Oh, goodness me, yes. No, I've learnt my lesson. So this one is much more organized, better planned out. There's more of a narrative arc that I'm aware of when I've started it. So I know where it's going. I actually know how it's going to finish. I know what the key stages are throughout the narrative. So it's a case of just dropping in the scenes and the storylines as you go along. And there'll always be something serendipitous that comes along that you think, oh,
absolutely,
it's amazing, that could just tie in there. So, but it's certainly a lot easier to write that way for me.
Yeah, I mean that's what I find as well personally is Tarek, my co-host, who isn't here today, but he's very much of the pantsing school, as we'll call it. He likes to just, I think he gets a basic idea and then just likes to get out a quick draft, a vomit draft he calls it, and see what he's left with and try and knock that into shape. Whereas I definitely like to have a plan, but it's not super detailed. But it's like I was saying before, there are these sort of tempos that I want to try and hit. Now, it may be that as I'm writing it, as you said, things change. Characters do things you don't expect, or you get a better idea as you're writing it, and some things don't always fit. But just having a plan of some kind helps me to be confident that I can get to the end of this. Whereas setting out without anything, I do worry that I would end up like you, surrounded by paper and highlighters and not know what I've got here. So, yeah, I don't know. It sounds like you're happier with this second approach, perhaps.
Miles happier, and it just helps if you don't have much time and you think I haven't really got enough time to write much on it, but I can just start planning a little bit more.
Yeah,
and so that it's a much easier way of writing. And as you say, it also gives you the confidence that you know where you're going and that you're going to be able to resolve the various different elements to it. So for me personally, I'm not going to follow Tarek's path anymore. That's for sure.
And on the model, the route that you've taken to get this published, is that a route, because we have a lot of people who are aspiring authors listen to this podcast. Is it a model that you would recommend? And what are the downsides of it? Obviously, downsides sound like it might be the financial side of it. You've got to put a lot in yourself to get to this position. Is that right?
Well, yeah, there's obviously a cost involved. I think if you're going to go down the route yourself, it helps to have allies. And, I've spoken about mine, and writing's a lonely business, and then if you've got to go through the process of putting it out yourself as well, I think that's really hard. It's really hard for a writer to do that. So you need people on your side to help you, and whether that's a publisher or whether it's some people who are going to help you put it out yourself, I think that's really important. I think it just depends really on what the book is and what resources you have, and what contacts you have and what you're looking to achieve with it. But we were very lucky going down the route that we have, that we were able to find, a publicity team that we really like, that I think are excellent. And, I've worked in that area for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And PR agencies aren't always as good as you'd perhaps hope they would be. And so I was a little unsure when I met the team, but they are absolutely brilliant. They're first rate. And so to be able to pick the PR team you want has been wonderful. And same with the design. Paul's designs are excellent, and to have that degree of control over what you're doing has been really enjoyable as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the PR team got you on this podcast, so they must be good. So you've got Fallen Feathers coming out. You're working on the next one. I know you said you hope to have it done by now, but realistically speaking, you think maybe end of the year, next year? When do you think you'll have that?
I suspect probably January, February time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to, we obviously need to do lots of press and promo around this one for the next few weeks, but then I want to really crack on and get this next one finished.
I know you're going to look at your reviews. Many authors are like, don't look at your reviews, or some only look at the 5-star reviews, or some. I know some authors, when they first come out, like to look at the 1-star reviews. They find them amusing and things like that. But that soon wears off, in my experience.
Oh, goodness me. I don't know, Marco. It's difficult in the digital age avoiding stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Said or written about you,
Yeah.
At least in the old days, you'd actually have to physically go out and get a copy of something or have it sent to you, and you could just say, no, I don't want to do that, and ignore it. But I think now it's going to be harder, because even if I decide that I can't bear any more criticisms, you just need a mate to see something and text it to you and ask if you've seen it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know. I suppose I'm always interested in what people think, and I think you can always learn from criticism, both positive and negative, about what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I think there's a good place for constructive criticism. Absolutely. It's
yeah,
just that
absolutely.
Some of these 1-star reviews aren't always that constructive. Let's put it that way. What was the last book that you read?
What was the last book I read? So, the last book I've read is The English Führer by Rory Clements. He's a bit of a, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. So he's written these thrillers set in wartime Cambridge, and I just think they're wonderful. They're really they're page turners, and they're very evocative of that particular time. So I've read lots of his. Other more recent books I've read and loved was The Homes by James Milet, who's another local author to the area I live in, and it's just so good. It's a crime story set in an orphanage in Glasgow. And then on non-fiction, Charlie Was Good Tonight, which is a biography of Charlie Watts by Paul Sexton, the music journalist, which is a fabulous read for those who love the Rolling Stones.
Excellent. And what about the last film that you watched?
Goodness me. I have not watched much film for a long time. I've watched a lot of TV. I'm desperately late to Succession, but I'm loving that, and I've nearly finished that. I mean, I can't believe it's taken so long. And obviously, I have a slightly vested interest in Slow Horses and Ted Lasso and those programs. I'm looking forward to watching Cate Blanchett in Disclaimer. And what else? And then I another guilty pleasure is sort of, and I'll get told off for saying this, but it's very traditional British crime dramas like Morse and Midsummer Murders and things like that. I just enjoy watching them too.
Excellent. Yeah, no, Slow Horses. I've not watched the new series yet, because I don't like going back to this week by week basis. I want it all there to binge it
in one go.
Night. Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, the very, very last thing, as Tarek would say, is a very quick fire either or. There's no right answer apart from one, according to Tarek. So we'll start with music or writing.
Is that in terms of listening to music and reading?
No, I was thinking for
creating.
For you, it was more for the creative side of it. Yeah.
Writing, definitely.
Writing. Yeah.
Writing. Yeah.
TV or cinema?
Oh, that's hard. Probably TV, just because it's easier and I do more of it.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird.
Music or no music when you're writing?
Music.
And last one, paper book or ebook?
I prefer a paper book, but I love an ebook too. So
if you had to
which
pick
is,
one, though, you have to pick one.
oh, if I
This is the
if I
big
had to
one.
pick one,
This
if I
is
had to,
between me and
if I,
Tarek. This is the big fight.
if I had a book that I couldn't wait to read, and I was going to cherish it, it would have to be the paperback, because you can smell it.
Yeah.
What does Tarek say?
Yeah, no, he's a big ebook person, but very
So
few
you
people.
can't smell an ebook.
Exactly, and he hates when people say they like the smell of a book. I don't know, it's got a thing. So yeah, no, you that's the right answer as far as I'm concerned.
Good.
Definitely, but no, that was great, Adam. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Bless you, Mark. I don't think you need Tarek on this podcast.
I agree with that. I say that.
Well, I think Adam was right there. I'm not sure you're needed for this podcast.
I think from listening to the episode, it sounded like both of you were quite drunk, to be honest. So I don't think you knew what was really being said. So I'll give Adam the benefit of the doubt this one time.
Since he hasn't met you, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, thanks very much to Adam for coming on the podcast. I enjoyed that chat, and like I said at the start, I'm interested in hearing how people bring their books to get out there, and obviously getting endorsements from people like Stephen Fry is obviously going to help with the profile of that book. But even with that isn't enough always if you don't have that backing of a trad publisher. So you have to find your own ways to do it. So I'll be interested to see how Adam's book does. But we'll put a link in the podcast description so you can pick that one up. But next week we have another great guest.
That's right. Next week we're chatting with Barnaby Walters, who is it's a really great chat with him. He's written 7 or 8 books now in quite rapid succession in the last 4 or 5 years. He was a social media coordinator for Watersons, so he brings that kind of bookseller knowledge with him. We have a nice chat with him about how Watersons operate, bookstores, shelves, how that whole thing works. And we have a good chat with him about Book of the Month, don't we? About how Watersons pick that and what the impact that has on sales.
And also, interesting. I mentioned planning v pantsing in that episode there, but Barnaby is someone that it turns out is a meticulous planner. I don't think we've ever had a planner that is more meticulous. Basically, sounds like he plans out whole books and just saves them on his drive, ready to be written as and when needed, which I suppose is why he's able to produce so many books so quickly. Because
not only that,
in the can.
Not only that, but he writes books. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but the question about music or no music when you're writing is a insane answer, which I can't imagine anyone is able to write.
Right. You were disgusted by that answer, I think.
It's a very good chat, and he's got a new horror book out, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, it's a really great chat next week.
Yeah, so please do tune in for that one. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. And as I mentioned before my voice runs out at the start of the podcast, we do have our Patreon with lots of extra benefits and extra shows and bonus content and stuff. So please do check that out as well if you enjoy what we do.
Yeah, and if you want to get in touch, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can join the Patreon. You can join it for free. Come to the Discord, chat with us there. Or you can send us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk. You can find us across various social media platforms. We're still on Twitter for the time being anyway. Don't know how long that will last.
Not for much longer, I don't think.
Not for much longer. Well, that's it. Not for much longer, people. So you've only got, I'd say, another week or so to get that tweet in if you want to talk to us. But just search for @UKPage1 across pretty much any social media platform.
Of course, I've discovered how to make posts go viral this week.
Oh yes, Marco. I don't know if anyone realised Marco had quite a lot of success this week with a viral post about
Blue Sky.
spines on Blue Sky.
Yeah,
it was an interesting article about the AI
disrupting the publishing industry with AI.
We're all about
I expressed my views on that, and it turned out that those views were rather popular.
So basically, we're about to go massive on Blue Sky.
Yeah, as I quickly learned, having a viral tweet means absolutely nothing. Other than you have to turn off your notifications. That's the only thing that matters. But yeah, please do check us out on social media. And if you want to join the Discord, that'd be great, because it's a good little community on there, and we're having good fun chatting about stuff. So yeah, please do that. But otherwise, we will speak to you next episode.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening, and join us for the next episode.
See you later.